Picture this. You and your family have just seen that a new theater in town has opened up and you guys want to go see it. You bring your kids there, the show starts, it's beautiful, and all of a sudden a fire breaks out. You and everybody else in the audience is running for the doors or the gates nearby, and when you get to those gates, it's padlocked shut and you can't get out. Well, that's the story we're going to talk about today.
I see you.
Hello, my spooky little babies. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Thanks for joining me. My name is Haley, and every week, this is only week 2, but every week my plan is to come on here and do 2 of my favorite things in the world. 1, makeup, and 2, talk about something that haunts my dreams at night. And this week we are traveling from last week's adventure in Denver, Colorado, northeast up to Chicago, Illinois, where we're going to talk about the Iroquois Theatre tragedy. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to comment down below. I'm also going to list everything that I used in the video today in case you want to follow along. Iroquois Theatre opened its doors in Chicago, Illinois in November of 1903, the 23rd to be exact. Now, it was a massive 1,600 seat facility that was supposed to rival the theaters that people were going to see Broadway shows in New York. The theater was, it was grand. It had a giant staircase that connected all of the floors. It was made out of marble, and it had mahogany doors with glass and giant marble pillars as well. So it was a big deal. It was beautiful, and the guy who designed it, Benjamin Marshall, he really just wanted it to be top tier. Benjamin took his sweet time designing this thing. He said it was partially because he did a lot of research looking into a bunch of tragedies that had happened at other theaters throughout the country, because his plan was to prevent anything like that from ever happening at the theater. There were also lots of issues opening with getting permits to do specific builds and labor strikes even. So the opening, this theater, they took a long time to get open, but the city really wanted to have it open by the fall of 1903, and they did. They opened it in November. The big seller of the theater and for people to come in was that it was considered absolutely fireproof, which was really good, because apparently there were a lot of fires happening in theaters because of faulty wiring or dangerous lighting, and part of the fireproofing included, they have a big curtain that they can drop down on the stage, and their curtain was made out of asbestos, which we already know is not good for you in the first place, but it is also a fireproof material. Just in case something were to happen, they could put the curtain down and contain it. So 2 days before New Year's Day, 1904, the theater put on a show called Mr. Bluebird, and they sold out the theater for this show on December 30th, 1903. And now, a little key about the show itself is that it was a musical, kind of heavily geared towards children. So the show had a lot of mothers and their children attending that day. And it was packed, especially, I guess the bottom section of the theater had a standing section, and the theater had sold out that whole section and then some. So they max capacity over capacity to get people in there to see this show. The show went on, and people were really enjoying it. They were mesmerized by all of the decorations, the acrobats hanging from the ceiling, and by Act 2, it was like a moonlight scene. So in this scene, they had a specific kind of light that would show down onto the stage, or the stage area. Now, during this scene, they put the light on, and it created a moonlight effect, really brought the ambiance, and people were really like, wow, this is so cool. Well, the light somehow managed to catch a nearby curtain on fire. And the fire lit up this curtain and traveled upward and started burning all of the decorations that they had hanging from the ceiling. Now, unfortunately, and no one knows for sure or exactly what had happened, but the audience didn't really notice the fire at first, or maybe they just thought it was part of the show. So they continued watching, and that was until the stagehands had realized what was going on, and they attempted to contain the fire by dropping that giant asbestos curtain down. It did not do what they intended. First of all, the curtain got stuck about halfway down, got caught on the track or something, so they couldn't even get the curtain all the way down in the first place, and so the fire just kept expanding. The stagehands, they kind of realized that something was going on, and they were like, okay, well, at least we've got these fire extinguishers. So some of them went and got these kill fire extinguishers that the theater had provided them to use in case of emergency. They were completely ineffective. They didn't put out any of the fire at all, and that's when kind of people began to realize that an emergency was happening and that they needed to get out. Before the audience could fully get out, some of the stagehand and the actors and such, they attempted to exit, or they did exit the building through a rear entrance behind the stage. Well, I don't know if you guys know anything about fire, but it loves oxygen. And so when they opened the door and the cold wind blew in, the fire basically breathed in that air and just blew a giant fireball out into the crowd, and it burned a lot of people. So once the fire blew out into the audience, then it was really like, oh, we've got to get out of here. So people were getting up and they were running for the staircase to escape, and there were so many people packed inside of this theater that when they tried to get to the staircase, they kind of just got blocked up in there. They were running and they were trampling each other and getting stuck, and unfortunately people died because they were getting trampled to death. Pause for 1 second, we've got to take an eyeliner break. Okay, eyeliner's on. So, anyway, an attempt to escape, people started flooding towards the doorways where the grand staircase was at. Now, the problem was, when they designed this building, the doors didn't open outwards. So all of the people running up to the door trying to get it open just crowded up against the doors, and these doors opened in. So they pushed against the doors and they couldn't get them open. So they were trapped inside. Now, other than that, they also, and this is really bad, you guys, those who did manage to get into different sections, there were other sections where there were these like iron gates that were the doorways instead. Now, in an attempt to prevent theater goers from going into like more expensive sections than what they paid for, management at the theater decided that they were going to padlock these exits shut. And so when people made it to these gates to try and escape, they couldn't get out because they were locked in by management and they hadn't come to open them back up to let people out. The building, and another design flaw there, was that when Benjamin designed it, he focused a lot on aesthetics, and therefore he opted out of adding in, when you go into a theater and you like look at the floor, there's those lights on the floor so you can see a pathway to get out. This theater didn't have that, so people were getting lost trying to find a way out, and there were also no emergency exit signs, so they didn't even know which direction to go in all of the chaos anyway. Now, despite not having, proper signage or lighting of how to get out of there, they did in fact put fire escapes on the building. Now keep in mind, the show was happening in December, so it was wintertime, it was cold, it was icy, people were getting to these fire escapes. Now unfortunately, guess what they didn't do before opening the theater? They didn't finish building those fire escapes, so a lot of them didn't have a ladder to get down, and people were desperate, so they started jumping from the fire escape to get away. Now, the show was also happening during a time when people were working. There just happened to be construction happening at the building across the way from the theater. I think it was a college maybe that they were building at the time, but the construction workers there noticed the chaos and the fire that was burning the building, and they went ahead and they grabbed some, I think they were like 40-foot long planks, and they laid them across from the building that they were in to the theater so people could use them as a bridge, which is great, except people lost their balance trying to get across said bridge, and therefore they were just falling into the alley below, where people were also jumping from the balconies of the fire exits to try and get away. And they were just creating heaps and heaps of bodies, and I read somewhere that some of these piles of bodies were as deep as 10 feet deep. Unfortunately for the people on the bottom, they didn't make it, but they did manage to cushion the fall of the people who were coming after them, so they saved some lives. Sorry, we're trying out a new foundation today, and I don't know how to feel about it. I look like a ghost. In the midst of all of this chaos, the workers for the theater realized they didn't really have a way to contact the fire department to get help. So one worker there ran multiple blocks down to the nearest fire station to alert them to try and get somebody to help. And by the time the fire department made it to try and calm the situation down, help people get out, the entire ordeal, and we finally did get the fire out, but the entire ordeal only lasted about 15 minutes. And in those 15 minutes, 602 people were killed. And that number also includes the people who made it out of the fire but died later because of their injuries from it. Now, the fire chief at the time said that upon entering the building, he walked in and shouted, "Is there anyone alive in here?" And he reportedly said that there wasn't a sound coming from inside the building, so there wasn't anybody who had made it still inside. And because of the number of casualties that had happened, this fire, this is considered the, just some blush, the, deadliest theater incident to have ever happened in US history. Now, after the chaos of the fire and everything that had happened, the number of people who had gone missing because of it. The families of the people who were in the fire spent the next day or days, even their New Year's, traveling to morgues trying to identify their loved ones, which is so sad. And do you know who took the blame for this? No one. They were all pointing fingers at one another. It's so sad. They blamed it on Benjamin because of his design and lack of safety features, and they also blamed it on management and the workers there for not having proper training on what to do in these situations or how to go get help faster to try and alleviate some of the casualties that had happened. I guess fortunately this situation did impact the future of theaters, because now we do have lighted paths for exits and signage, but it didn't help those poor people at the time. So of course, after a devastating disaster of this magnitude and the theater remaining open, or it's gone through some changes since then, but of course people are going to sense presences or see spirits, and one of those is that of Miss Nellie Reed. Context for Nellie is that she, at the time of the show, her job was an aerialist. She was a fairy who was hanging from the rafters by a harness of some sort, I'm sure, but her job there was to be a fairy for the show. She would drop carnations down onto the stage or the audience or whatever. Now, unfortunately, when chaos broke out, somehow stagehands managed to get down the majority of her crewmates, and unfortunately Nellie was forgotten, and she was left hanging from the rafters during the fire and near the curtains and near the foliage in the ceiling. It's said that poor Nellie, who was only like 23 or 24 years old at the time, she caught fire, and trying to escape or get her own path out of there, she managed to unfasten her harness and fell down and hit the stage. It's unknown if Nellie had made it out of the fire. There's some reports that I read that said that she did make it out and people had seen her on an ambulance, but unfortunately due to her injuries from the burns and from the fall, she passed away shortly afterwards. And it's said by people who have attended the theater, they've seen who they believe is Nellie hanging out around it in the alleyways. Now, speaking of the alleyway, that one where people were jumping and falling to their death, that alley was also, after the tragedy, used as a place where rescuers they would stack up whatever body they had found inside or near the exits of the deceased. And that alleyway was later it was named the Alley of Death and Mutilation. We are so blush heavy today. Do I kind of like it? Maybe. Okay, we're going for a very theatrical look today, which is totally fine. So the Alley of Death and Mutilation, because of the unfortunate souls who either jumped and fell to their death there or were later stacked in the alley by rescue teams as a way to collect them. Now, people, again, who work for the theater, they kind of talk about how they don't really go into the alley anymore, but when they do, they have either felt cold spots, heard whispers, or there's even been reports of seeing dark figures in the alleyway. And by dark figures, I mean shadow people, not people hanging out in the alleyway. After the theater fire occurred, it just sat there for years and years, and in 1925 the city of Chicago decided that they were going to demolish it, but they still wanted to use the site for a new theater. So in its place they rebuilt, and this theater was called the Oriental Theater. The Oriental Theater was a quick turnaround. It was demolished. The original theater was demolished in 1925, and by 1926 the Oriental Theater reopened in its place. Now, of course, you know, same spirits, they continued putting on shows there, and then in 2019 the theater was again switched hands, and it was shifted over to being now called the Netherlands Theater, which is still there today. They put on shows there today. In 2005 and 2006, the theater that was rebuilt there was hosting actors to perform the musical Wicked, and the actress Anna Gastier, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name, don't come after me for it, I don't know much about people in musicals, my bad. The cat wanted to come in. So Anna was working at the theater. She was part of the play, the Broadway, thank you for that, the musical Wicked, and her job was her part in the musical was Elphaba. And Anna reports that one day while practicing Act 1 of the musical, which I guess is that part of the musical is when Elphaba is learning how to fly. So she was hoisted up into the rafters learning how to fly, and Anna says that she had looked up into the balcony above the stage, and you know, there were people working there, so it's not unusual to see people up in that area. But she said it was odd at the time because there was a group of people sitting up in the balcony area, and this didn't look like workers. This looked like a family that was sitting up there. And now she said that when she came back down to the stage and looked back up into the area, the family that she had seen before was just gone. Somewhere online there is a video of an interview where Anna talks about her experiences while working at the theater, and she talked about another time that, you know, she was not performing, but she was backstage walking through the hallway there, and she turned a corner and noticed a group of 3 people standing at the corner. Anna said that upon approaching them, she noticed that they were wearing turn of the century clothing, so things that you would see people wearing in the early 1900s, and that the group of people appeared to be a woman who was holding the hands of her 2 children, which is so sad, you guys. Like a woman and kids, which I know at the time, of the actual tragedy, it was in fact a show geared towards children, but having the actual sighting of some children is just incredibly sad. But anyway, while walking, she continued walking down this hallway towards them, and then she said when she turned the corner again and looked back, well, prior to turning the corner, she kind of just nodded at the family, and they nodded back at her, and she continued on. And when she turned the corner again and looked back behind her, they were nowhere to be seen. Just so sad that, that this tragedy did take the lives of, people in general, but kids. I don't know. I have a really soft spot for children, so that just breaks my heart a lot. But, So that is the story of the Iroquois Theatre tragedy, which is the biggest theater tragedy in US history. I'm gonna pause for a second and apply my lips because I struggle really hard to talk to you guys, but give me 1 second and I will come back with the final look. Alright, my lovely, so this is the final look. I don't know, I think I like how it really came out. I know it's a little blush heavy and a little dark, a little moody with this nudie lip, but I think it came out really pretty. If you liked the story or you just like the makeup, give me a like, subscribe, keep coming back because I really enjoy doing this and I would really love to talk to you guys. So leave your comments down below if you have any questions about the video, or if you want to see me talk about a specific story, I'd be more than happy to do so. I just need to know which ones you want to hear about. Once again, thanks for joining me, and I will see you guys next week. I love you. Bye!